اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أجمعين وبعد. The session today is going to serve for you as a reference to look back on regarding some of the principles and methods that are used in dealing with aspects of Tazkiyah. So the amount of information may be high, so you may not remember all of it, but you'll be able to look back on it and reflect and remind yourself. As what I'm trying to do for you is summarize the basics of a third of Islam, basically. I'm summarizing a third of what Islam is in 20 sessions, which is absolutely impossible to do. يروي الإمام الطبراني أن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال, the hadith, collection Imam Tabarani, authentic generation, where he says عليه الصلاة والسلام, إن أخوف ما أخاف على أمتي شح مطاع وهوى متبع وإعجاب كل ذي رأي برأيه. Indeed, that which I fear the most for my ummah is when they obey their selfishness and they follow their desires. And every one with an opinion is vain towards his own opinions, meaning they are filled with vanity towards what they know and what they are capable of. All three, which are parts of what I'm trying to talk to you about, aspects of the heart and of the nafs, and mistakes that are internal, really, more than anything. When you recite the Quran, you find a verse that is repeated twice, where he says, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ أَفَأَنْتَ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِ وَكِيلًا. And another one, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً. And the wording here is very interesting. He said, do you see the one who took his Ilahu hawa, his Lord or his worshipped one, to be his self-desire? The hawa nafs, or the desires of the nafs, is a very important aspect of your existence that you need to learn how to become sensitive towards, to be able to identify, to the point where many scholars would require those who walk the path of tazkiyah for the first few years to do nothing aside from go against whatever their desires are. I mean, just for years, all you do is, if you want to do it, just don't do it. If you don't want to do it, then do it. وَخَالِفِ النَّفْسَ وَالشَّيْطَانَ وَعْصِهِمَا وَإِنْهُمَا مَا حَضَاكَ النُّصْحَ فَاتَّهِمِ. Just always go against, because almost never does the nafs want you to do something for a good reason. Almost never does the nafs not want you to do something for a good reason. So it always makes its choices based on its selfish needs. So learning to kind of go against that is a big part. But when you read the verse in the Quran, مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ, he didn't say it the other way around. He didn't say مَنِ اتَّخَذَ هَوَاهُ إِلَهَ, the one who took his desires to be his Lord. He said the one who takes his Lord to be his desires. This allows for another interpretation of this ayah that's very important and very, very delicate. اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ also means that he took his Lord based on his hawa, on his desires. Based on his desires, meaning the image of God is not that of him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's based on whatever you want it to be. Meaning even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the image of Allah that you have, if you're not careful, can go from being his actual image, subhanahu wa ta'ala, figuratively speaking, not literally, obviously, to an image that you distorted to make it suit what your desires are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not who you want him to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who he is. He is whom he is, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And accepting who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is probably the most important part of your deen, is knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, his nature and his essence, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not making God who we want him to be, based on our desires. Those who are angry want a God of wrath, and those of us who are weak and want a God of ongoing mercy. No, it's not whom we want him to be. It is who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, because your hawa will interfere even in that. Your self-desires will interfere in the image of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, making him something that he may not be subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to fit your agenda. Very, very dangerous. مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. So what are we going to do about this problem of these desires and this nafs that wants what it wants? It wants it because it thinks it's best for us, but it knows what is best for us, but it doesn't. So in order for things to work, we have to be able to learn to perform mujahada and tazkiyah, to perform the striving against the nafs and to tame it. There are four main principles of mujahada and tazkiyah, and there are four main methods. I'm going to share with you these principles and these methods this morning. There are many more. I'm just going to share some of the core ones so that you have something to build upon. We'll talk about the principles. There's a few principles you have to be well aware of regarding mujahadat al-nafs and tazkiyatha. Number one, that it has to occur through graduality and tenderness. The nafs is very flexible, which is why human beings are very adaptive. We can adapt to almost any situation. It's very interesting. One of the most famous quotes I find to be interesting to think about is that you'll be surprised what you can live with. You'll be surprised what you can live with in life. You'll think that you can't, depending on the situation you're put in, you'll find that you'll find ways to adapt. Human beings find ways to adapt. You'll get on a plane and go work with a philanthropist group somewhere, and you'll find people living in conditions that are absolutely heartbreaking, but they're surviving because the nafs is very adaptable. It'll find ways to survive. However, the fact that it's flexible doesn't mean that it's not breakable. It can be broken. You can break the nafs. It can be shattered. It can undergo enough trauma that it breaks, which is why children, if you're too harsh with children, you can break them. You can break their nufus, and you can cause them mental illnesses that will continue with them for the rest of their lives. It'll take them years to get over it, because the nafs can be broken. And in tazkiyah, one of the main principles is that the goal is not to break the nafs. We don't want to break it. We don't want to destroy it. It's you. It's a part of who you are. You're just breaking yourself. That's not the goal. The goal is to gradually change it. And it requires a certain degree of finesse and a certain degree of tenderness. You want to slowly make changes for the nafs in your life. For example, if someone decides, and this happens all the time, I see this all the time, those who perform a strong tawbah in their lives, but they go from a position or situation where they didn't pray at all, for example, and they didn't have any Quran in their lives, they had no good deeds, and they change 180 degrees, and now they're praying all the sunnahs and doing all. This is a short-lived transition. It's a short-lived transition. I usually try to catch those people and say, slow down, slow down, slow down. This is not going to, this is short-lived, because your nafs can't put up with that degree of change all at once. For a while it can. Maybe in Ramadan it can, but then it's too much for it to, it's overburdened. It's overwhelmed with the amount of change, so it rebounds again. So it rebounds, and then they lose all the progress, and it becomes very depressing and sad to them. Why? Because they're not following a basic principle, which is you have to gradually change it. The nafs has to be brought into this with graduality and with tenderness. Extreme changes can happen, but you need extreme circumstances for them to actually stick. If you're in the same circumstances, extreme changes rarely work. That's the first principle. This is a gradual, tender change that you're going to bring upon yourself. Number two, you have to have a certain degree of honesty and self-transparency. This feeds into what we talked about yesterday. If you don't know what your values truly are, if you're not honest with yourself about your choices and your decisions, about your beliefs, about your habits, if you lie to yourself, then you're not going to be able to make changes. If you justify why you do what you do, if you rationalize it, if you want to believe that you're better than you actually are, then you're not going to perform much in tazkiyah. Sometimes some scholars will put this as the number one principle, that the number one thing that you must have is honesty with oneself. What you tell people or what you lead people to believe, that's a different thing. It doesn't matter to me. We all wear social masks. We walk around with a certain persona. We want people to see us in a certain light. It's the way that we carry ourselves socially. You require that to survive. We can't walk around telling people exactly what. No, this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has concealed for us our sins, so we continue to conceal them ourselves. And we're not in the business of walking around telling people about our most intimate thoughts and fears. And no, this is something we keep for ourselves. We have to keep up a certain image socially. This is normal. However, for tazkiyah, you can't do that. You can't deal with yourself and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that persona, with that lie. It doesn't work. You have to take that mask off. And you have to deal with yourself in its raw form. And you have to admit who you are in your raw form to Allah and to yourself. In order for you to make change, you have to admit who you are. That transparency and that honesty is absolutely critical. If that is not found, if you have lost the ability to do that, if you've lost the ability to know who you are and what you're doing, and admit how bad things are, then you can't fix it. This applies for everything in life. I can't treat a patient who's in denial of their diagnosis. We can't help them. If they're not willing to admit that this is the problem, then we can't offer them any help. The first step is you diagnose what the issue is. That requires transparency, because we don't want to believe that things are as bad as they actually are on the inside. It's actually a mess in there. What we tend to do as human beings with big messes is we just tend to close the door. Just keep the door closed for that room. How about we don't go in there very often? Because it's too much of a mess to fix and it's too much work, so we just deny that it's a problem to begin with. And that's the reality of what happens on the inside. Matters are not in order on the inside for most human beings. And when you look and you figure out to what degree they're not in order, how much work is required, how much time has to be spent, you can maybe feel a little bit overwhelmed. So you tend to maybe not be honest about it. Lie about how bad things actually are. But tazkiyah doesn't work if you're not willing to admit how far away you are from where you should be, how behind you are on this path that you should be walking. Number 3, you require consistent habits. أحب الأعمال إلى الله كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم ما دام وإن قل. The most beloved behaviors to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actions, are those which are consistent even if they're small. Even if they're small. So it's a gradual change. That's in terms of how you change. But then when you pick up the habits, you have to become consistent with them. 100% consistent with them. Which is why one of the 4 rules that I shared with you at the beginning of this series, one of the 4 rules, is a wird and a hizb. These are small habits where daily you invocate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where daily you recite a little bit of Quran regardless of what's happening. When they asked Sayyidina Ali, when he explained to people before you go to sleep, you do Subhanallah 333 and Alhamdulillah 33 and Allahu Akbar 34 before you wake, because the Prophet alayhi salatu taught him that, and he said, I never left it since he taught it to me alayhi salatu wasalam. So one of the people, al-ghamizun, someone who wanted just to spite him a little bit, radiallahu anhu wa ardah, and he was surrounded by people like that before he passed away. فقال يا أمير المؤمنين ولا ليلة صفين. Not even the night of Siffin, the night of the battle. And you're telling us, فقال. So he looked at him and he said, ولا ليلة صفين. Not even that night. I did this every night, as in every single night, for better or for worse. In winter or in summer, during illness or health, during poverty or wealth. It makes no difference. You do this consistent habits. You pick up, so it doesn't have to be something colossal, huge, something that is of a magnitude that you can't carry. No, small actions, but they have to be consistent. And that consistency has to be generated by yourself. Aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's fara'id, obviously, that we stick to those. Obviously, al-faridah is something you're going to be consistent. It's a consistent habit. But here I'm talking about when you add things to yourself. When you add certain behaviors that you know are beneficial to you. For example, when we talked about reflection and contemplation, I gave it as its own session. That is something that has to become a consistent habit. Every day you have to do this. Every day you have to make sure there's 10, 15 minutes where you are engaging in deep thought on a topic of your choice, allowing yourself to learn and contemplate and think and grow on your understanding of these topics. You have to learn to pick up consistent habits. And then the 4th principle is complete abstinence and substitution. When you leave a sin or when you stop something, you have to stop it completely. One of the rules that people who suffer with addictions have is that once they stop, they have to stop forever, like completely. They have to have nothing to do, like for example, alcoholics. Once they go through their rehab and they're done, they're not drinking anymore, they can't exist in a place where there is drinking. They can't have friends who go out to drink. They can't sit in a place, they can't even look at a bottle They have to completely disassociate themselves from this. This is the rule, and this is outside of Islam. This is just what the human brain, what our knowledge, what our science has been able to teach us. And in order for this to work, you have to completely disassociate yourself from this problem. So when we talk about sin, when we talk about a habit you want to get rid of, it has to be complete abstinence. You have to get rid of it fully, which requires substitution, which requires a certain degree of substitution. Getting rid of bad habits leaves a void in your life, leaves a gap. There's something that you were doing for a long time that you're not doing anymore. What are you going to do instead of it? If you don't have an answer for that, you're just going to go right back to doing it again. So you have to fill that gap with something. You have to find something that you're capable of finding joy in, that you can find some degree of happiness, some degree of fulfillment by doing it. And if you don't do that, then it's just a matter of time. You'll stay away from it, for example, for the entirety of the month of Ramadan. But if you don't pick up good, consistent habits, and you don't substitute, then you'll just rebound after Ramadan and go back to the bad habit that you had before. These are the four main principles in Tazkiyah. That you have to respect the graduality and the tenderness that the nafs needs. Consider your nafs a child. You don't raise a child well by slapping them around and demeaning them. Doing that actually produces human beings that turn into monsters later on. It doesn't work. That's not how you raise a child. So you have to be gradual. You have to be tender. You have to make sure that you're honest with yourself. You have to have that transparency. You have to have the bravery, the courage that comes with admitting of where you actually are and what you're doing. That not only will help you fix the problem, it also grant you a certain degree of humbleness, which is what we pointed out as probably the most important value or ethic that we have in Tazkiyah. You have to make sure that when you have a habit, you're consistent with it. The consistency of habits when it comes to the principles of Tazkiyah is very important. If you're doing it one day and not the other, then it's not going to work. Once you pick up a habit, you do it every day. And if you miss it a day, you make up for it the next day. And then if you miss a couple of days, you have to reset and start all over again. And consider that you never did this before and try again, because you have to build that consistent habits. When you leave something, when something's going to be stopped, it has to be stopped cold turkey. You have to end it. Unless it's an addiction, which requires rehab and requires help and requires some external supervision. Otherwise, you stop it and you have to disassociate yourself from everything that is surrounding it, and that's going to require a substitution. You have to bring something into play here that's going to make up for it. Those are the four main principles. The four methods are categorized into the following categories. You have external methods that help with Tazkiyah. There are internal methods. There is lifestyle, and then there are reinforcement aspects. These are the four categories. Now I'm going to point out the important players. There's a lot more than what I'm going to talk to you about today. But try and memorize as many of these as possible so you can start applying them to yourself. So external forces, something from outside. When I talk to you about the cycle of how thoughts and feelings and actions, they all affect one another. Now, in order to actually change the movement of the cycle, if it's moving in one direction, if, for example, you don't like someone, so your feelings are negative towards them, meaning that you think bad thoughts about them because of those feelings. So you do bad deeds, and those deeds cause you to dislike them even more, causing you to think even more negative thoughts. So this vicious cycle goes in action, goes into place, and it just never stops, and it just grows more. Your negative emotions grow, and your negative actions increase, and your negative thoughts increase as well. Sometimes in order to break that cycle, you have to bring an external force into it. You have to bring something that will change it. For example, seeking knowledge. In order for your thoughts to change, you have to have different information. You have to know different things. What are you going to contemplate? What are you going to think about if you don't have an external source of knowledge? Which is why ilm is so important. Which is why talab ilm is so important, because it's feeding into your ability to think. What am I going to think about? I need someone to tell me something different about how to go by this human being that I'm dealing with in my life, or this difficulty that I'm struggling with, or this obstacle, or this challenge. I need information, external information. So you go and you listen to a dars and you learn something. Now you have new material to contemplate. Now you have new material that you insert into your contemplation process. But you need that external source. You need knowledge. You need someone to teach you something. You have to learn something new so that it changes how you feel about something, or it changes your thought process about it, or it changes your behaviors towards it. The reason that ilm is so important in our deen is because changing oneself, which is one of the main goals of sending prophets, is very much dependent on the internal efforts that you're going to put in. But those internal efforts will fail unless there's some external help. And ilm is one of the strongest pieces of help that you'll get. If I tell you, you have to be humble, and I leave you with that, you're going to sit there, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? How do I change? You need to learn. You have to sit down and listen and learn about what it means and what the definition is and how it's practiced, and take examples so that you can insert that into your contemplation process, or you can insert it into your practices, and now you have that external. It tips, it changes the cycle's movements. It's moving this way, now we inserted more knowledge in it, so you have different ways to think about things, so your thought process changed. Now your thought process is a bit more positive. It's going to make your feelings positive and make your actions positive. Now we're hitting the brakes on this vicious cycle, and we're starting to turn it virtuous. Companionship, having good friends. Ya akhi, good friends. The most valuable thing you have is your attention and your time. Who is taking that up? Who on earth, from the people that are here, who is taking up your attention and your time? Ya akhi, you can't work. None of what I'm explaining to you works if you have bad friends. If you have, and it doesn't matter your age. I know all the older guys are looking at their children. I'm talking to you too. If you're 50 or 60 or 70 and you have bad friends, you're going to suffer the same way. Your time, who you spend it with, companionship is so valuable. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa Abu Bakr wa Umar, wa Abu Bakr wa Umar. That's what Anas said. Anas is a kid. Anas is telling us this. Of course, he explained this to us as a imam and alim and sahabi. But he's telling us his experience of this as a child, sitting there, seeing. This is what he would say. قال فكنت أرى رسول الله يأتي رسول الله وأبو بكر وعمر ويذهب رسول الله وأبو بكر وعمر ويجلس رسول الله وأبو بكر وعمر. I used to watch him. He would walk, and Abu Bakr and Umar with him. He came, Abu Bakr and Umar. He sat, Abu Bakr and Umar. They were with him. The companionship. ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار. He needed a companion. When he went to Mi'raj alayhi salatu wasalam, Jibreel went with him. You need good companionship. It's an external force, but my God, is it important. It is very, very important that you surround yourself with people who will bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not farther away. Not further away. People who are going to increase your religiosity, not decrease it. People who agree with the change you're trying to bring in your life, not people who will make you feel ashamed that you're trying it, or people who will discourage you, or people who think it's a joke. Be very careful about this part, please. Number 3, mentorship. For example, having those who will mentor you. مَا يَدُلُّكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِحَالِهِ قَبْلَ مَقَالِهِ. The people who point you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the way they live their lives, before their words, before they help you with learning about God, not specifically with their words, but with the way they live their lives. Having people like that is of such importance. You need that guidance. This is a path that you walk, not blindly. You don't walk it based on 1, 2, 3 in a book. You walk it based on having someone who's been walking it before you, to help you along, to guide you along. You need that. The concept of having a shaykh, an imam, a teacher, a murabbi. This is prophetic. This is prophetic. Or else, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have just descended the book from the heavens? Here's the book. Memorize it. No, He sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the book was revealed to him, alayhi salatu wasalam, because we needed that person to teach us. He would teach people who would later teach others. And this is an ongoing chain of teaching, of handing this divine knowledge, this sacred knowledge down from one generation to the other. This is of extreme, learning to do this, learning to, spending time with people and learning from them and observing how they, I spent a week with Shaykh Shukri al-Luhafi, rahmatullahi alayhi. A week in my life. And this week I did mulazim, and mulazim is a beautiful thing. When you have mentorship, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But I'll tell you this. There's a lot to talk about this gentleman, wallahi. Rahmatullah alayhi, he passed away, it's almost a decade now. I used to wait for him to go and visit his daughter. I couldn't wait for him to go visit his daughter. Like I would sometimes encourage him to go visit his daughter, because I couldn't go with him. That was the time I couldn't go with him. And the reason I wanted to do this is so I could go and buy a chicken, eat it, and sleep. Because he didn't eat and he didn't sleep. Because this gentleman didn't do either of these things. And I could not keep up with him. Like I could not keep up with this man. I needed to eat and I needed to sleep, because I was not like this person. So I'd wait for him just to go and visit. I knew he went to visit for 2 hours immediately. Buy a farouche mishwi, eat the whole thing, and then immediately sleep. just so I can make up for the days before. But you learn things from people just by observing how they're living their lives, just by watching them, even if you can't reach that or achieve that degree of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you observe it and you see it and you live it, then it stays with you in your life. That mentorship is absolutely critical. Environment, another external environment. Surrounding yourself, putting yourself in the right company, making sure that you're removing from your vicinity where you live and what you're doing the things that are ruining your religiosity and your spirituality. Your surroundings, what's around you, who's around you, where do you situate yourself, where do you spend your time? This is important, not just your companionship, but the environment that you're in. This makes a big difference. If you spend time in places where there's fahisha and there's munkar and then this is going to rub off on you. You spend your time in places where there's the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are good habits. This goes for everything in life, even if we're not talking religion. If you want to be a good doctor, you have to make the environment appropriate. Those who are talking about this in a place where you're more likely to learn, you have to put yourself in the right position. Whatever you want to do, your environment will dictate how well you do things. If you have the wrong environment, then I'm telling you it's not going to work. You're going to fail here. So focusing on the environment, who you're surrounding yourself with and who is your spend, very important. These are external forces. External forces, the knowledge that you learn, the mentorship that you get, the companionship, the environment, all of these things you have to take care of, because if you take care of those things, if you are surrounding yourself by putting yourself in an environment where you hear the word of Allah, you see khair, you observe khair, you have mentors who are living, emulating, they're embodying the goodness that you want to be. You have friends who are encouraging you, you're learning. This is going to help. This is turning the cycle in the right direction. With time, a lot of bad habits will flush off and a lot of good habits will be picked up. Utilize that cycle and the external forces that you can put into it to make it work. Number two, internal forces. Your ability to contemplate things, to reflect on them, to think deeply. We've talked about this before. You think deeply about things and you change your way of feeling about them and what you do about them. This is a very, very powerful tool that you have. You can make a lot of change in your life if you just take time to contemplate and reflect deeply and engage in deep thought about the topics in your life that are important. Practices, when you start practicing certain behaviors and getting into the habit of doing them. Exercises. Exercises are very important. Exercises are behaviors that you do in a protected environment to learn something about yourself. To learn something about yourself. To do something you don't like to do. And observe the feelings that you have on the inside. Observe the nafs pushing back. And then becoming sensitive to that feeling. Knowing what the nafs feels like when it pushes back. Knowing that that's the nafs. That's my nafs not wanting to do it. So why is this important? Because once you identify what the nafs feels like when it pushes back against you, you want to do something helpful. Later on in life, when life is complex and you want to do something and then the nafs pushes back, you're like, I know that feeling. I know that. I know who that is. You're not going to fool me. That's my nafs. It doesn't want to do this. No, I'm not listening to that one. Because sometimes you're conflicted. Why do I not want to do this? Is that the nafs? Is it something else? You have to learn. You have to isolate. You have to go and try and one of these exercises is that you take an action of khidmah and you do it every day until your nafs stops hating it. You think of something of service that you don't like to do. For example, the dishes or taking out the garbage or driving a sibling to school. Something that you don't like to do that has benefit to someone else. I'm not talking about jogging. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'm talking about something that has service to someone else. And you keep on doing it until you stop hating to do it. Until your nafs gives up. Until you're able to change its perspective on it. Until it stops fighting back. Why? So that you can learn what that feeling is like. How your nafs will push back and how it will stop at a certain point. That if you are consistent with it, it'll give up eventually. These are internal, and the majority of tazkiyah is internal stuff, and I'm going to be talking about them as we move along throughout the month, inshallah, more, so I'll leave it. Number three, lifestyle. Lifestyle. Your sleep, your food habits, your routine, your physical health. Very important here. Tazkiyah doesn't work without them. Tazkiyah does not work without them. If you don't have a good sleep routine, if you don't sleep well at night, or if you don't sleep at night, or if you don't do these things, then nothing I'm talking to you about will help. You will continue to fall into the same traps time and time again until the eternity of the end of time, until you fix your lifestyle. The Prophet ﷺ had a very strict regimen, how he lived his life. The teachers that I learned, they all looked the same. They all had the exact same figure, exact same lifestyle. It's very interesting. It's almost like it's just copy-paste of all of them. alayhi salatu wasalam lived a certain way. He slept early in the night, and he woke up for tahajjud, and he slept again, and he woke up for fajr, and he stayed awake afterwards, and he took a nap during the day. His sleep was well. People think he didn't sleep. No, he slept, alayhi salatu wasalam. He just slept in a way that's the healthiest way to sleep. He made sure that the night was a time that he slept well, and he took a rest during the day, and he took care of his sleep hygiene. Very important. Within Tazkiyah, it doesn't work if you don't have that proper regimen. Sometimes you need to break the cycle. We used to do Tazkiyah camps. It used to be around 2 weeks in the summer in an area in Damascus, close to Damascus, called the Bassini. It's an area just outside. It's beautiful. It's mountains and trees, and the shuyukh used to have like villal there, like places where it would be an open Arabic type of house with a swimming pool, and we would go 20 or 30 young people, and you would no electricity. And we didn't have devices anyways, but if you did, it was taken away. And you would just wake up at Fajr every day, and you would fast, and or if you didn't fast, you would eat. Like, there was a specific regimen. You would sleep early, and we used to do a muaskar. Like, and this obviously has nothing to do with Tazkiyah, but the regime used to make us go for a month every year in university as a way to serve in the army. People hated it. I loved it. And I never couldn't say it because people absolutely despised it, but I loved it. I loved when this happened. Why? Because it was just it was a reset of my lifestyle. Because by the time the year was over, I was up all night studying, and my whole routine was broken. And then we went to you're there. There's no electricity anyways in the middle of it. You have to wake up every day around Fajr. You have to run for a couple of kilometers, and you have to do. It's work, but it's very good. That reset is helpful. Camping is something you can use with your kids if you want to reset your lifestyle. Make sure that you get a good sleep routine. Food. What is the hadi of the Prophet ﷺ in food? That you never fill your belly, ever. Huh? Muslims are willing to follow everything but this in their deen. Everything is on the table, but not this one. This one, we completely ignore that he said, ﷺ, مَا مَلَأَ ابْنُ آدَمَ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ. That you will never fill a container in your life. In your life, huh? You'll never fill a container more evil and more harmful to you than your own stomach. And if you have to, then a third for this, and a third for that, and a third for as you know. This is how he lived, alayhi salatu wasalam. We're not willing to even entertain that. No, for Tazkiyah you have to have the right food, eating habits. You have to eat healthy as well. You have to have a good routine. Your routine should be something that you are able to follow every day. Routine is healthy for the human being. It doesn't make your life boring. It gives you some structure. You need that structure. You need to be able to wake up at the same time and engage in specific habits. It makes you feel good. If depression comes from not having that habit, if you speak to a psychiatrist and you're depressed, he'll tell you, wake up in the morning, take a shower, change your clothing, get out of the house, go walk, go do something, go sit in the cafe and drink coffee, do something different, because it's helpful. That routine, that change is very, very healthy. You have to have that good routine. Physical health. Now, I'm not one to speak about that honestly, but it's very important that you work out and that you take care of your physical health, and that you make sure that you're taking care of the qalb. The reason that the names of all of the spiritual entities are body entities is because there is some degree of parallelism, and there's some degree of connection. The lata'if are there, meaning when you say the qalb, the subconsciousness, it's also the qalb, the pump. There is some connection between them. I don't understand how it works, but it's there. We know that it's there. A diseased heart, like physically diseased heart, is not going to produce a good function, obviously, unless there's a diseased heart, as in the routine is bad and the physical health is not taken care of. You're not going to have a spiritually healthy heart no. So your physical health, this is lifestyle. Lifestyle makes a big difference. And if you need something to break the cycle for that lifestyle, then you do that. And then the final one is reinforcements. How you reinforce all of these things. Dhikr and dua and Quran. Right? This is what you do. And durus, this is how you reinforce these topics. You speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a lot, asking Him to help you with these things. You invocate Him subhanahu wa ta'ala a lot, and His invocations are concepts of tazkiyah. I told you, what's the antidote for vanity? It's hamd. What's the antidote for arrogance? It's istighfar. So if you sit there, alhamdulillah, astaghfirullah, you are reinforcing, ridding yourself of these diseases. Reciting the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of the khair in the world comes from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reciting the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Reciting the stories of the salihin and learning from them. All of this reinforces these concepts. Those are the 4 principles and the 4 methods. There's a lot of information in this session. Take it, reflect upon it. utilize that which you find beneficial from amongst it, and we'll continue to talk about the concepts moving forward. Subhanakallah bihamdik, shanu la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullah khair.